Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Tales from the Cabin. I'm your host, Joey Leone. And for today's podcast, we're going to talk about nostalgia. And what are we nostalgic about? We're nostalgic about the cars of the 1960s. And for this podcast, I'm going to list my 10 favorite cars from the 1960s, American made cars, that is. I'm sure there was a bunch of European cars that would have made the list, but we're going to start with the American cars. And, back in the 60s, when I was a kid, everybody seemed to have brands that they loved. Whether it was their brand of cigarettes, or their brand of alcohol that they drank, or even kids had their brand of cereal that they liked. Brands were really important to people. And there were no brands more important than the cars. Everybody had their own cars that they liked, and there's certain companies that they liked. And the car kind of said something about you. It said something about your personality. If you were an understated guy, maybe you were going to drive a four-door Plymouth Valiant or a Fury 1. Or maybe if you were a bachelor and you were looking to get some attention, maybe you had a nice Mustang or you had a Corvette. If you were a successful businessman, maybe you drove around an Olds 98, or a Cadillac. So it really meant a lot what car you brand. And in those days, the car companies were aware of that. And they deliberately tried to make these cars look different than each other. Even in companies like GM, where you had Buick, you had Cadillac, you had Chevrolet, you had Oldsmobile. They all tried to look a little bit different, although they shared some of the similar, look. But they were really trying to be different. So let's get ready to have some fun on this list. And the first car I'm going to list, ladies and gentlemen, is the 1965 Buick Riviera. Take a look at that. What a spectacular car. It was such a classy car. It really personified that personal luxury car. Bill Mitchell was the designer who worked for GM at the time, and he was responsible for that razor-sharp styling that made it one of the most elegant personal luxury cars ever built. It had a beautiful interior. It had a good, strong motor in it. It was a true gentleman's muscle car that blended luxury with surprising performance. And on this second picture here, you can see a little bit more of the side view of it with the front. And you can see, again, with those rectangular grill with the little rectangles in there. And, of course, the shrouded headlights, which were a big part of that 65 look. And also you see in this picture the rally wheels with the white wall tires. It gave it kind of a classy look, like I say, luxury look. But if you look at this, really, you look down the side of the car, it really has, a look of like, the late early 70s Monte Carlos. They shared that look on it because it was a really popular look. And in this third picture here, you're going to see it in red. Now, I don't remember seeing these cars in red. Most of the times I saw them when I was younger, it was in the black, or you'd see it in navy blue, what they called midnight blue, or you'd see it maybe in silver, or maybe even white. But I thought the red was an interesting color to be able to feature here. And again, you see those Buick rally wheels on it, and it just, it really said something about you. Now, in this next picture, we're going to see it again in red, and we're going to see that beautiful front end on the car. It just had a great stance to it when you saw it coming down the street. And at nighttime, those louvers would open up, and you'd see the headlights. And here's a great view of it from the rear, understated yet classy. This is a rear that you'll see repeated in some of the cars, GM in that era, with that really nice, classy, understated bumper with the taillights underneath the bumper, and it gave it a nice, clean look. And it was, and of course you see the Riviera script logo there, and of course the Buick emblem badge there, and it just was beautiful. Now, a quick look here at the side with that shrouded headlight, and of course those Buick rally wheels, which just gave it a really cool look. And look at the interior of the car. Oh boy, look at that. And that was, you saw this in the 60s, the space age 50s, and of course the cockpit 60s. That looked like a cockpit, it had that, and that wood there, that wood grain, it's not real wood because the car companies realized that you couldn't use real wood in the car for longevity. It would, if it got wet or it started to react to the weather, if you were parked in, up in New England, it would react, or you were in the Southwest, it would react. So they went with the faux wood grain, which is kind of cheesier, but it is more functional, let's face it. And now we're going to look at that great motor, that big Buick motor. That's the Wildcat motor, but the motor that really was known in the Buick was the 425 motor, the Nailhead V8. Now this picture here is a 401 Nailhead that came on the Buick Wildcat, but it's the same basic motor. And this was like truly a gentleman's muscle car. We can see it here, and this last picture here, it just states class when you see this. The 1965 Buick Riviera. Well, for the next car on this list, it's another one that just has to be on the list, and of course that's the 1963 Chevrolet Corvette, and what is known as the split window coupe. This car was only made for 1 year with the split window because there was some discussion that it was unsafe, because when you looked out the rear view mirror, and let's face it, in those days the rear view mirrors were real small anyway, you were seeing a lot of that cutaway inside the two pieces of glass. But it looked amazing, and I sat in actually a 63 split window, and it did impede your view out the rear view mirror, but who cared? Like they said in the movies one time, in the famous movie Gumball Rally, what's in back of me, I don't care, and he tears the rearview mirror off. But it really has a unique look. And in '64, they went to the full window in the back. This car was designed by a great designer who did a great job, sculpting that car into that next generation of Corvettes. His name was Larry Shinoda, and his dramatic styling turned the Corvette into a true world-class sports car. And of course, you got to know too that this Corvette debuted that 327 V8 with the fuel injection. Fuel injection was big in European cars, and the United States was definitely trying to keep up with the Europeans. Now here's a look at the back of the car, and it looks fast standing still, with that big Corvette. I always loved the fact that they always had that big Corvette emblem featured on the Corvettes. On my '61 Corvette that I drove, it had it on the trunk. And this one obviously has it right on the back, underneath the split window. It has the two Corvette rear taillights, which debuted in 1960. Mine was '61. There was the same thing. It had that little cut above it where the lights were underneath it a little bit. Probably not the greatest for viewing, and you'll see in some of these cars, the view of the rear taillights wasn't exactly a priority. And look at those simple, plain bumper with the license plate in the middle of it. Now in this picture here, you see it in silver with those classic turbine wheels with the Corvette had, and you can look right into the glass. This is one of my favorite pictures. That's why I included it. And it's a spectacular car, and it just said something. It really, when you came down the street, everybody kind of chilled out. Here's another quick look at it in white, which is one of my favorite colors. And of course, a lot of these Corvettes did not come with air conditioning, so I'm sure that in a hotter climate or on hotter days, you'd appreciate driving a white car as opposed to a black one. Now the interior here is from the red one, and this interior here is pretty much a throwback to the early Corvette interiors. You see that in the passenger seat, that Corvette logo there with that brushed steel. That had pretty much carried over from the ones from the 50s. The steering wheel is different than the one I had in the '61. Mine was kind of flat. It was a 3-spoke wheel like that one, with the horn in the middle. But this one is a concave wheel. But you see the red, the classic Chevy red Naugahyde tuck and roll interior that Chevrolet was known for. The old tuck and roll. It was just this car. You really can't say much about it except just look at a picture of it. And that's the 1963 split window Corvette. Next on the list is another one of my personal favorites. That's how it got on the list, and that's the 1967 Cadillac Eldorado. Well, this was the year that Cadillac brought the Eldorado back, and it's a front-wheel drive Cadillac, and it was the first front-wheel drive Cadillac since the 1930s. And it really, it shared GM's advanced front-wheel drive platform with the Toronado. And of course, that look at that razor sharp rear lights, and I love the fact that it's got the chrome in the rear coming back from the fender, and the rear tail lights are on each side of it. What a classic look that is, and beautifully, understated yet so totally sharp. And of course, it's got the Cadillac emblem in the middle of the trunk. And then you could see underneath the Cadillac emblem, it had the little emblem. You had the little door there where you'd fill the gas tank, which these days you probably couldn't get away with doing that. But it really was a beautiful design. And here we look at the front of it, and look at that with the hidden headlights, with again that repeating that rectangle grill, which was a GM stall. Now this one here looks like it's it has like a either a vinyl top or a cloth top. It's probably a customized car. Finding pictures of these cars on the internet is a little bit of a problem. And definitely the hubcaps, I don't think are of that year, because I remember seeing those hubcaps. I think similar ones my brother had on his '75 Eldorado. But what a great look, and you could see that front end, and that classy front chrome bumper. That later on for safety reasons they had the 5-mile-an-hour bumper, and they ruined the look of a lot of these cars, and a lot of designers were depressed over that. And then here's one, probably the rarest of rare, and this is a Cadillac '67 Eldorado convertible. Woo! What a car that is. And it just like I said, there was a guy on my block on 54th Street. He had a '69 Eldorado, and it was a great looking car. I like the simplicity of the '67. Sometimes when these cars were designed, as they would go on from year to year, instead of subtracting stuff, they would add stuff. So sometimes the earlier versions of the cars are the most simple and the prettiest. Now this little side view here through the window is the steering wheel and the front dashboard of the Eldorado. It was very, very similar. This dashboard was pretty much carried through most of the mid to late '60s. My dad had a '69 Coupe de Ville, and it had that same steering wheel and the same appointments on the dashboard. And here you can see a closer look at the classic Cadillac speedometer going up to 120. You had the temperature gauge on one side, you had the fuel on the other side, you had the clock over there. And then, it was cool too, because underneath that, you had your key right there. It wasn't hidden underneath or anything like that. The key was right there. And you have your climate control there on the right. And, it just was, and then further on, you don't see it in the picture, but that's where the radio was. And there's, again, the rear view of it. It just is class personified. This one with the wide white walls on it, which, I never was really a big fan of in those days. They looked a little gauche to me, but or gauche maybe. But it really was a great car. And that is the 1967 Cadillac Eldorado. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on to one of my personal favorites. And this one I kind of struggled with. And this is the 1965 Pontiac Bonneville. Now, this picture I picked because it does have a cool look to it. I love the color of it, and I love the setting of the picture. I'm not a big fan of those wheels. Those are like kind of aftermarket wheels. I kind of like the stock-looking wheels that came with it. But aside from that, look at that. Look at that sleek car that is. It looks kind of low to the ground. It just has a cool kind of, like a look of a real American car. I think these Bonnevilles and especially the mid '60s and late '60s, Pontiacs, they really were American cars personified, and they were fast and they handled pretty well. And you see here the front side view of it, and look at those vertical headlights. I love the fact that they have that pointy hood that comes up to like almost like an arrow, and then if you look down, you see the classic Pontiac emblem, which is an arrow pointing down towards the front of the car. I think that's a beautiful appointment on the car. But getting back to those headlights, you see they're surrounded with chrome, and they're pulled back from the bumper where you have the bright work, outlining that. But you see those headlights in that shroud there of the chrome. And then look at that chrome bumper, the way it just embraces those front lights. These people were designing timeless cars. And, the Pontiacs were just, just had a great look. Now look at the back. I mean, you can't beat it. Look at the Bonneville with that just plain printed name on it. The font on it is just very 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 simple. You have the bright work in the back. You have, again, nice. It's a little bigger bumper, but it is still understated. And then you have the bright work with the Bonneville in the back. And you look above that, and you see the Pontiac logo. You see the 3 taillights. And on the side, the rear quarter panel with those skirts, they have, it has that reminiscent look that you'll see later on in some of the Lincolns and Mercurys in later years. Pontiac was very, very ahead of their time in their design. And here's a rear view, just a straight rear view of the car with the dual exhaust. Now, I'm not really sure if I know it came with dual exhaust with some of the bigger engine packages. I'm not sure if there seems to be a wider one, or whether those were added later. A lot of these cars are fitted with more modern appointments. And then I threw in a look here at it in a different color, just to kind of show you what it looked like, what the lines look like in a lighter car. And just any color with this car, it's going to shine like you can't believe. I mean, that was the magic of Pontiac's design. Now we're going to look at the dashboard here, and this is just a classic American dashboard. Again, fake wood, but it really has a great look to it. And the contrast of the chrome and the wood on the dashboard, that classic GM speedometer, and then, of course, the steering wheel with the acrylic steering wheel was great. And it just was a car that when you got in it, it was a classic American luxury, sporty look. And if you look over on the right-hand side, of course, you have one of my favorite things about the American cars in those days. You see the little crank fly window. I used to love the fly windows. Excuse me. It was just a great thing on the car. And you see, of course, the classic bench seat in the front with those with those seat belts that nobody used. They always got tucked in the car, I guess. And by the glove box, you have that little handle that helps you get in and out of the car. It was just very cool. And here you see the classic Pontiac motor from that era. And this one is not the 421 tri-power that it came with. This is the 390 4-barrel. And it was a great motor, lots of torque, lots of speed. It really gave you a real get up and go. Now here we see a vinyl top version of it in kind of like a light purple. Just whoa, what a nice look that is. I never was a big fan of the vinyl top cars. A lot of people in the car collecting business will tell you that a lot of times they put vinyl tops on cars where the paint didn't come out too good. There was a flaw in the paint. They'll say, okay, let's make this one a vinyl top. And there you see the side view of again. And you see that sweeping line that starts in the middle of the front bumper, front quarter panel, through the door, out right into the wheel well, and and then right out to the back. What a slick look that was. These cars weren't very aerodynamic, although they were toying with aerodynamics in the look of the car to try to make it look more space age, but they really were not very aerodynamic cars. But one of the cars I always loved, the 1965 Pontiac Bonneville. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead to another great Pontiac, and this one is the 1969 Pontiac Grand Prix. Now, this one I have a personal love for because it was driven, not this car in the picture, but this same model car was driven by my dearest friend, Mr. Michael Rose, and he had a dark green Grand Prix with the 400 in it, and it was just a fast car. It wasn't an SJ, but I think when he had bought the car, the guy had it before him, had it worked on. But it was now look at that design. That 69 Grand Prix was designed by the great John DeLorean. He reinvented the Grand Prix as a personal, stylish luxury car. The long hood and short deck proportions really influenced American car design for years to come. This is a very influential car. And you can tell, too, because it has that Stutz Bearcat look in the front with the horizontal headlights and that interesting grille in the middle. Now, that was such a successful design that ended up being used on other Pontiac models, even their four-door models, and even on their station wagons for years to come. That one has the Pontiac Rally wheels. This one has some white wall tires on it. And here it is in black. Boy, does this look like a badass in black. And like I said, I wouldn't want to be driving a black car without air conditioning in it. But it does show the bright work a little bit more. And again, you see these are the Rally wheels with the competition tires on them. In the old days, they came with bias ply tires. But look at that beautiful design and that kind of, that front quarter panel. It just has a really cool design where it kind of reaches down for that front turn signal. It has a really unique look. DeLorean really knocked it out of the park on this one. And here's the interior of it. It's just a plain, Pontiac interior. It has that cockpit design again where it kind of wraps around a little bit. You can see a little bit through the steering wheel, the fake wood steering wheel, of course. And you could see the gauges in the middle. It was just really simple. It was supposed to be a personal luxury car, but it wasn't really trying to compete with the Cadillac or the Eldorados or any car like that. It really was a car of its own. It really was trying to be more sporty than luxury. Again, we take a look at this in black. And here's an ad for the 69 Grand Prix that I found. And now we're going to look at the back of the car. And here it is in a different color. And you can see, again, almost replicating the back of that 65 Riviera. With that one where the tail lights are underneath the grill. This one, they're integrated into the grill. And this is the steel top car, of course. What I always loved, Mike's car was a steel top. And I just always loved the look of the steel top cars. And then there's that classic Pontiac 400 motor. It was really, they were really known as really quick cars, and they handled really well. And you go back to that original picture of it. It's just it's one of those cars that I'll always remember and have fond memories of my friend with his car racing around Brooklyn with me in the Corvette and him in that 69 Grand Prix. Next one on the list is, again, a little bit of a pink flamingo, and this one is the 1960 Lincoln Continental. And, you really kind of, you're looking at the end of an era here. Let's face it. This car is the end of the era for Lincoln, because in 61, of course, they went with that other design that became very well known, the suicide door, four-door Lincoln. But this one was the end of that. It was really the jet age. They called it the jet age Lincolns before this famous 61 redesign. It had a massive unibody construction, which made it feel incredibly solid on the road. Lincolns were always known for a soft ride, but look at those vertical, slanted headlights. I mean, and look at that, the bright work on that grill. And of course, it had those two bullets on each side, which Cadillac had been using those in the 50s, and that wraparound bumper. I mean, this was luxury personified. I mean, you were not a 9-to-5 guy driving one of these. You owned your own company. You were some rich guy with that Lincoln, and especially this one is the four-door version, which of course meant that you maybe you had a family getting in the car. Now we're going to move to the rear view of it. Oh my God, look at that! Now there were two different versions of this car for the rear view, but the rear was the same. The taillights, those three taillights, which ended up being replicated later on for the Mercury, a line of Mercuries in the mid-60s. My old 63 Marauder had those rear taillights. And then has the little understated, fins, because fins was still big. But look at how they integrate that rear bumper in with the bright work where the big gold Lincoln logo is. I thought that was very classy looking. And you could see in the front of the car, it's still got a little bit reminiscent of that 57 Mark, Lincoln Mark front, where they were carrying over some of the look to it for consistency. But this was the last year of this design, and I think they were tooling up for the 61 design. So really not much changed. Here we look at the famous breezeway window. Yeah, it is, ladies and gentlemen. One of the coolest things now, I remember Mercury had this too on some of their models. But what an idea that was. you could open up that back window. On the Lincoln, it was a power window. On some of the other Mercurys, I believe they were just, manual. But you could open up that window and get a breeze right through it with the windows open if you didn't feel like using the air conditioner. And also that the way the hood kind of came out and protected that rear window, it definitely guarded the people in the back seat from direct sunlight. Here we see the gauge cluster with the Lincoln here with that classy two-tone wheel. They were known for their interiors. Lincoln and Imperial were also known. This is a really simple layout. It's got the 3 gauge clusters on the top. It's got 3 other adjustments on the underneath, probably the lights, maybe cigarette lighter. Of course, you had to have a cigarette lighter because everybody was smoking their brains out in those days. And, and here's another view of it. You see that front bench seat where you could, comfortably sit 3 people, maybe a young adult in the middle. And that's nice leather. Look at that leather. That was real leather in those days, ladies and gentlemen. If you had one of those Lincolns or Cadillacs or Imperials, you had to get out that mink oil once a year and definitely work on those seats. Otherwise, they would dry up. And for this last picture here, it's a little artsy picture of the car in looks like Arizona, actually, sitting there. It's just looking regal as possible. So that's the 1960 Lincoln Continental. Next on the list is a car that I owned myself, one of my personal favorites, the 1963 Cadillac Fleetwood Series 60. The Fleetwood, of course, was the most, luxurious of all the Cadillacs. It was the line that also they used for the limo, which we'll take a look at maybe later. But this one here is the Fleetwood. And, in the 60s, you really had a lot of the Cadillacs. They were really on a par with, with all cars, all the luxury cars made, Rolls Royce. I mean, if you got in a Cadillac in the late 50s up until the 60s, there were things in Cadillacs like this Fleetwood that weren't even in Rolls Royces. I mean, and of course, GM and Cadillac were known for those frigid air compressors. The air conditioning in the Cadillacs, was so much better than the European, cars, who didn't really focus on that. And then you see the side view of it here. It's just, again, it has, now the doors had like a molding around them, which kind of takes away a little bit from the slickness of it, but they really wanted to protect it. And then you see those big fender skirts. I remember changing a flat on that car, and those fender skirts weighed probably 40 or 50 pounds. But there was no way you were getting to that spare tire. That flat tire without it. And it had the carryover, I would probably say, from the 50s, early 60s Cadillacs, with the tail fins, with that oblong tail light underneath it. And here's a side view from up above where you see it with the steel top. This is exactly the same car that I had. Same hubcaps, same rims around the hubcaps. A really understated, Cadillac. Remember, Cadillacs in the 50s were very appointed, and they had a lot of bright work on it. Cadillac was really going in a different direction here, as far as what I could tell. And then let's take a look at the interior. This is the exact interior I had in my car, except that mine did not have the black leather inserts. Mine had a houndstooth cloth insert and the white leather, which was actually an upgrade from this, because a lot of people preferred sitting on cloth rather than leather, especially if they were, in the warmer weather, if they were wearing nice clothes. They prefer to sit on the cloth. It was a very luxurious interior. Those seats were very nicely padded, as you could see. And here is a side view of those door cards, those classic Cadillac leather and fake wood door cards and sides. And they were really cool. This Cadillac, it had the fly window in the front, and also had, as you can see, fly window in the back, or vent window. We call them fly windows, but they were vent windows. And they were power windows. So if you look at this picture here, this is the dashboard. Of course, got the great Cadillac insert in the red Cadillac insert in the steering wheel. And if you look down on the left-hand side, you see the window controls. There's 8 of them. You could control all 8 windows with the power windows. And And miraculously, when I had my '63 Fleetwood, all of that worked. There were those motors in the car. I mean, there were no chintzy parts in these cars. I know I have an old Jeep CJ7, and all the parts for it are all pop metal. There was no pop metal in these cars. This is real good stuff. That classic Cadillac early '60s speedometer with the temperature gauge, and mine had what they call a Sentry control. You can't really see it here, but it was like this looked like a sight from a gun, and it would turn your brights off if there was oncoming traffic. Very much ahead of their time. And there it is, that classic 390 Cadillac motor that was just a bulletproof motor, and it had lots of torque. It was a real fun car to drive, even though it was a big car, because it had power to spare, and when you turn, the testament to the strength of that motor, ladies and gentlemen, was that when you turned on the air conditioner, the car didn't, you didn't feel it. You didn't feel it lose power. It was really the peak of craftsmanship with that hand-finished luxury appointments, and really symbolized, the success and prestige of people in the 60s. That, like I said, that 390 V8 was whisper quiet. I mean, it was just a great motor. And I'll tell you a quick story. Kathy and myself and the kids were driving back from Kathy's cousin's house in New Jersey, and we were driving the Fleetwood for a Sunday drive, and we got pulled over by the cops because my tags had expired. And the cop pulled me over, and he sees my beautiful wife and my two cute little kids in the car, and he's giving me a warning. And then as he's giving me the warning, he said, "Could you open up the hood?" And I was like, "Oh, sure." And he opened up the hood. He goes, "Oh, there it is. There's that 390 motor." He goes, "My dad used to race stock cars back in the day in New Jersey, and they used to look for wrecked Cadillacs to be able to take the motors out because they were such dependable, strong motors." And we'll take one more look at the front of it. And this is the limo version of it too. So I figured I'd throw it in there just for the heck. And you can see in the limo version, it has a full third window in the back on each side, foregoing the vent window. There it is, the 1963 Cadillac Fleetwood Series 60. We're going to move on to another car that I had, and this one is the 1961 Chevrolet Impala 4-door hardtop. Now, you say it's a 4-door. What's a hardtop? What does that mean? They all had hardtops. They didn't have 4-door convertibles. No, the hardtop meant that there was no bar in the middle. There was no center post between the doors and between the windows, between the front and the back of the car. And it gave it kind of really a cool look and a kind of a slick look, and very, it just was, it wasn't clumsy like the ones that had the post in them with a regular 4-door sedan. This is not a sedan. This is a 4-door hardtop. And this is the exact color of the one I had. It's the same hubcaps. I didn't have the white wall tires on it. But it was just a cool car. It had that great 283 in it, 2-barrel motor. It had pretty decent gas mileage for an 8-cylinder from that period. It was the 61. And here you see it here with the back window up. And with the back window up, you can see, that framing around the window. This was a heavy-duty window. It wasn't just a glass. It really, when you had both windows up, it was very solid. And this one here is a 2-tone. I love the back of the car, which we'll get a better look at in a moment. And I love the fact that they tied in the white roof with the right side molding with the Impala logo on it, as you see here. And here's an advertisement for it, again, in a green color. I don't remember ever seeing it in this green color, but it's a pretty cool little picture there, and it's real Americana. Let's look at the back of the car. This is the exact color, again, of the one that I had. And you can look at the back of the car, and you can see that those 3 classic, which became classic, Chevrolet taillights with the white centered one in the middle for the reverse light. This was the 3 backlights that debuted in 1960 after the 59, which had that cat's eye rear, which was only 1 year, which a lot of people love that, which I do too. This was the second year of the three taillights, which continued on with the Impala for many years. The Bel Air had 2. But this design continued for years. I love the way they kind of got rid of the fins and brought that back to that just that flat black back look, and then it kind of comes down into that V with the Chevy emblem in it, and it's got nice bumper. It's got those two bumper guards on it. I don't remember mine having bumper guards on it, so those were probably added later to protect the car. But like I said, it had that that real nice 283 motor in it. And now for this last picture here, I'm going to show you just one I figured I'd throw in there. This was the bubble top two-door with that really small pillar in the back. Look at the size of that window, but this was a cool car. You could have probably gotten this in different colors too. This red, just accentuates it a little bit more. But I don't know how safe that thing would be in a rollover, because that back pillar doesn't look too steady, too strong. And we'll take a quick look at the interior. And this one here is just a typical Chevy interior. They weren't trying to be luxurious. It was a functional interior. The steering wheel, as you could see, has the holes in the middle, the 4 holes with the Chevy logo in the middle. Very similar to the Corvette one that I had. And then it's got the little bars on it where you could blow the horn. The Chevy wasn't known to trying to be a fancy car. It was known as a functional car, but they still had a certain amount of styling to it. I love the fact that this car had the big vents in it. You could pull the vents open and vent the front of the car, and then just be driving and get fresh air through the car. So there it is. One of my personal favorites, the 61 Chevy Impala hardtop. Let's get on to a little bit now. Well, let's start looking into the future. And this one looks into the future. 1967 Oldsmobile Toronado. Oh, boy, what a spectacular futuristic design this was. Now, the Toronado had debuted in 1963. So by 67, they had kind of really gotten their wings together. And this car, with the fading, headlights that would come up, the hidden headlights that kind of faded down into the trunk. To the front. The trunk, it looked like, the hood rather. Again, you see the GM rectangular grille, and again, I love that formidable Toronado front bumper. It almost looked like a rear bumper put on the front of a car, which is interesting because it was a front-wheel drive car. It was really revolutionary, that front-wheel drive personal luxury car. It had what they call the high-vo chain transmission, which handled that big block motor remarkably reliably. And, it was bold, it was futuristic, it's stylish, still looks modern to this day, 60 years later. It has a vibe to it. And here, let's look at the back of it. Now, in this picture, I'm kind of sorry that they didn't really put a license plate on it, because it's simple, very similar again. Look, this is 67, very similar to the 69 Grand Prix, where you see the taillights above the rear bumper. This is a real simple rear bumper. The Toronado designers were really trying to impress you when you saw the car coming. And in the back, it had that typical 60s fastback design. It was a great car all the way around. Like I said, they didn't really know about aerodynamics in those days, but they were toying with the idea, as you could tell by this rear of this car. And here's the front with the taillights open, which, does it look stylish? No, it probably is. I think they traded in some of the look of the car with the taillights open for what it looked like with the headlights open as opposed to the headlights closed. And here's a look at that heavy-duty front. Remember, the front axle of it was driving the car, so it was heavy-duty. And look at that big hubcap on the Toronado. And here's a picture of the Toronado. I don't think it ever came in this color, this burnt orange color. I put the picture up because I thought it was a cool representation of the lines of the car. And of course, I'm not really too sure that red line tire goes with the orange, but I'm not a fashion designer, so I couldn't tell you for sure. But then again, look at that front bumper, which looks like they put the rear bumper on the front of the car. Now we're going to look at the interior here, and this one here has that what I call the bow tie steering wheel, and and it just you could beep the horn. I guess they didn't want you to miss beeping the horn because they made it so big. But I think it looks pretty cool, and it was exclusive to the Tornado. No other GM car had that type of steering wheel. And then if you look in the center of the steering wheel at the dashboard, you see the speedometer, and it was like this rolling disc speedometer that you saw the red line there, and then the disc would move as you got faster. It's a very simple. I think they were really trying for something very simple in the dashboard to kind of move away from that 50s, gaudy, dashboards that look like they were, from a rendering of H.G. Wells or something like that. This is very simple. But the Tornado was, it had a strong motor in it. It had a great transmission. Like I said, that front wheel drive. It really, I remember people tearing up rubber with the front wheel drive Tornadoes. It had that much torque. And here's the last picture of it here, just in pure simplicity and just a great car. One that I don't know if you could, find any great ones in original condition these days, because there weren't that many made, but they were great cars. The 1967 Tornado. Ladies and gentlemen, for my last car on the list, we said we were going to go into the future. Well, now we're going to go into the real future. The 1963 Studebaker Avanti. Well, the word Avanti, kind of reminds me of avant-garde, and maybe that's what they were thinking of, because I remember seeing, sheet music that had the word Avanti in it. So look at that design. It is so European, and it was made by Studebaker. And can you imagine Studebaker making a car like this? But it really was indicative of the desperation that Studebaker had. It was really designed by a guy named Raymond Lowery, and he designed this car in 40 days. I'm sure that some of the Pininfarina Italian designer influence shone through on this car, because it definitely looks like a European car, especially with that, with that front single headlight and the Avanti name in the front. It really was, a great, remember too, this was the only supercharged production car in America at the time. It had a 289, the R2 motor, supercharged. It made 170 horsepower, which doesn't seem a lot when you're competing with, with other big muscle cars from 63 the U.S. had. But remember, it was a fiberglass body, and they raced this car actually at the Bonneville Salt Flats, and it broke some records. So the Avanti was not just a good-looking car. It was fast, and because it was so fast, it needed good brakes. And they had the front disc brakes in the car in 1963, which was very unusual. And here you have the front side look of it, and that European influenced bumper that was very, it was kind of like, you would say it was like a wraparound bumper, but it just had it really looked like a toy almost, the car. And I love the bright work on the hood on the driver's side. That just gave it a nice thing. Years later, you'd see some of the cars like Pontiacs have their tachometer outside the car on the hood. Well, this didn't have the tack on it, but it gave it a kind of a cool look for the driver looking out on the car with that chrome work there. Here's a rear view of it. Now, to me, the back of this car definitely looks like the 1800 Volvo sport car, the famous Simon Templar, the Saint car. It's very similar to that. And in that back window, you definitely could see the influence later on. The Barracuda used that back window, the early Barracuda models, and of course the famous Hemi under glass car you used to see in Hot Rod magazine. But this is the back of the car again, very European, very cool wraparound. As I said, wraparound bumper. This one's got the black wall, the white wall tires with those nice Avanti hubcaps on it. Let's look at the interior. This is your typical, European influenced interior, but with a little bit of an American tribute with that like fake tuck and roll looking dashboard. But it's got the 2 bucket seats. They weren't leather; they were Naugahyde front seats. Of course, you see the shifter there, the close ratio shifter, which was big in the European cars, whereas opposed the Americans had the Hirsch shifters, which were big, or like you were shifting a truck. And then, of course, right underneath it, of course, you see the cigarette lighter, which of course everybody needed the cigarette lighter. And it was a simple European design. And here we can look at the steering wheel, and the gauge cluster is typical European. Of course, it's got the key. And you can see where using the key had worn out some of the paint on the dashboard, but who cared? I mean, your key was right there, and I don't know if I'm glad they kind of got rid of that a little bit, but it was kind of cool. And of course, here we are looking again at that R2 289 supercharged motor, which was so far ahead of its time. And Studebaker just, they were so underfunded that the car just, it should have really, saved the company. Like a lot of car companies had models that saved the company. But Studebaker was in such bad shape, such bad management, such bad business that the motor couldn't do it. Look back at the front of the car. Now, after Studebaker went under, there were certain car companies, small car companies, that did continue the Avanti line, but none of it had the original appeal and the motor of the original Avanti. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's my end of my top 10 American cars from the 60s, my favorites. And please put in the comments if you have cars that you liked and maybe ones that I'd missed. I'm sure that my friend Joey Portogallo is going to be a little PO'd at me that I missed his GTO, because Joey's a great GTO collector. Sorry, Joey, but I'll probably catch you on the next one. Anyway, thanks for coming to Tales from the Cabin, talking about my favorite cars. And let's just keep going, and let's get nostalgic, and let's have some fun. That's what it's all about. And I'll see you on the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye.